Hey friends, welcome back to the Broken to Beloved podcast. If you're looking for compassionate conversations that provide practical resources to move toward healing and wholeness, then this is the place for you. Today, I'm opening the door for our first office hours episode. I sent out a few emails and invited our listeners and community to submit questions and mentioned it here on the show a few times. So I'll be sharing some of the feedback and questions with you. I'll also be sharing some updates about season 3, as well as a few plans for the fall. You're enjoying this podcast ad-free because of the generous support of our donors. All the work we do here is funded by our community. About 70% of our revenue comes from our programs like our annual summit and cohorts, and about 30% comes from our donors and supporters. We'd love to see that number go up a little to help make our work more sustainable throughout the year. By becoming a monthly donor, you allow us to be more strategic about planning events like our upcoming gathering here in Richmond on October 10th and 11th, and to bring in amazing guests for our annual summit, podcast, and book club. You help us to create high-quality resources for you, the members of our amazing community. The summer is always a little bit tough, and we could use your help. I'd love to see members of our podcast community join in to help us increase our monthly giving to sustain the work that we do here. If you'd like to become a donor and help make our programs like this podcast possible, you can join us today. The average donation we receive is $40 a month. If you're able to join us by setting up a monthly donation of even $10 or $20 or more if you're able, it would make a huge difference and allow us to keep providing you with this podcast ad-free. It's as easy as going to brokentobeloved.org/support or just clicking the link in the show notes. You can keep listening or even hit pause and go find the link now. We'll still be here when you get back. First, the updates. It's hard to believe that we launched the podcast just last July, and we'll be celebrating our 1 year of the show when season 3 launches. In that time, we've released 52 episodes, including this one, with some incredible guests. We have over 34,000 downloads, and you're listening in all 50 states and over 30 countries around the world. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't subscribed or followed the show yet, what are you waiting for? Be sure to hit subscribe or follow so you don't miss the start of season 3 when we return. If you've been around for a while, I'd so appreciate it if you would just take a minute to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It takes just a few seconds to do and makes a big difference, and it also helps other people to find us. Here are a sampling of some reviews from you, our listeners. Texas listener writes, "Brian's and his guests' words have brought hope and healing. Thank you." Lori writes, "Great podcast, critical topic, needed discussion. Thank you for addressing such a needed topic that goes unspoken too often. Thank you for being a kind voice where the many of us who feel broken and hurting find understanding, and where today's church can learn to grow in awareness, empathy, and increasing health. Now that we know better, can we do better? I sure hope so. Thank you for helping put language around spiritual abuse and religious trauma. The awareness, understanding, and empathy you're bringing into the world makes a difference." Thank you so much for sending that in, Lori. And finally, Flapjack LC writes, "Like a hug and warm mug of truth. This podcast talks about tough things, but does so in a way that makes you feel seen, hopeful, and more at peace with your past and present." Thank you so much for your kind and generous words. If you haven't left us a rating or review yet, I'd so appreciate it if you just take a minute to do so. We'll be back with new episodes starting Tuesday, July 1st with Dr. Hilary McBride. We're almost completely booked for all of season 3 through November, and I can hardly believe it. You'll get to hear from guests like David Gate, Becky Castle-Miller, Zach Lambert, Dr. Ariel Schwartz, and Ben Kramer. I cannot wait to share these conversations with you. I'm incredibly grateful for you, our listeners, for showing up every single week and tuning in. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of our community. As a little bonus, even though I'll be taking a break for the month of June, you are still going to get episodes every week, and then some. We'll be sharing some of our favorite episodes with you every Tuesday, as usual. They might be one of our most downloaded or just a favorite conversation I had with one of our guests. Then, on Fridays, we'll be releasing some bonus episodes for you from our archives. I know some of you have been around since day one, and some of you may be completely new to our community. And wherever you fall on that spectrum, I'm so glad you're here. On Fridays, we'll be sharing some favorite sessions from our annual summits. You'll get to hear and learn from the wisdom of our summit speakers that you may or may not have heard before. And I'll be sharing an exclusive discount code in case you want to pick up an all-access pass for all of the sessions from that summit. So, while I'm taking a break, you'll be getting not just one, but 2 episodes a week in the month of June. Of course, there's no pressure or expectation to listen to every one. And I know that there are some of you out there who absolutely will. A little note, as these are older episodes or sessions, you may hear some references to book releases, cohorts, or events with dates or deadlines. Those have likely come and gone, and you can feel free to overlook them. If you're looking for other ways to engage with our work, you can always follow us on Instagram, read our writing on Substack, or sign up for our monthly newsletters. The links will all be in the show notes for you. And now, I want to get to some of your comments and questions. The first one comes from Elizabeth in Detroit. My question has to do with discerning when we are ready and how to go about returning to church. I'm curious about how you discerned and even approached going back to church after whatever amount of time it took for you to heal to the degree that you felt that desire again, and what that looked like for you and your family. I have spent the past year and couple of months very intentionally creating space for myself to heal, process, and discern, and I'm sensing stirrings of desire to return to community and to corporate worship. I almost literally have no idea what church to even step into. I'm very skeptical of any evangelical church at this point, but not totally closed off to them. I'm open to more liturgical style churches. I don't know of any house churches or other iterations of how church is practiced in modern society, but open to that too, to a degree. It all just feels so hugely risky. But what makes it feel even more risky is that I have children, 6 and 8 years old, and I want to know that they will find safe pasture too. Anything that you could share on this topic would be greatly appreciated. Elizabeth, thank you so much for sending that. And I get it. It's really hard. And it did take us a few months. And even then, I think we would have waited longer if it weren't for our son, who I think was 5 at the time, 5 or 6. And intentionally creating space for yourself is great. You sound extremely aware of what you are looking for and what you're not looking for. And it sounds like you have a good sense of awareness of how your body is responding, even to the thought of going back to the church. And at the same time, this drawing, like you're saying, to return to community and corporate worship. And so one thing I would say is that reclaiming a sense of agency and knowing that this is your decision is going to be hugely important. When we experience abuse, one of the things that is so often stripped from us is our sense of agency, our ability to make choices for ourselves. And so part of the healing process is feeling like you are in a place to make decisions for yourself again. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. No matter what, it is going to be risky. Community and connection always is. And yet, those risks are kind of required if we want to reach out to find that. And again, that agency, that sense of agency and awareness is going to be huge as you choose whether or not you're going to take those risks. If you're looking for practical ways to discern these kinds of things, I highly recommend How to Walk Into a Room by Emily P. Freeman. It was such a helpful book for me. She really lays out some practical things that you can do to discern if and when it is time to step back into a space, as she says, to walk into a new room. She opens the book with this practice of point and call, of just looking around you and noticing what's there, or the mental exercise of imagining what kind of a room you're in right now, metaphorically, who's in the room with you, maybe who's not in the room that should be or that you would like to be, or imagining a room that you would like to step into and what you would like to be there with you, what would help you to feel safe, or what would feel safe for your children, as you say, a safe pasture. I love that you're in that process of discernment for yourself. And again, as long as it is your process and your choices that you get to make, hopefully that moves you towards that sense of safety and connection. And even when you do decide to go back, because we tried several churches before we landed on one, there may be times that you pull into a parking lot or walk into a building and feel your body tensing up, or maybe shutting down or a sense of panic or anxiety, and know that based on what you've experienced, that is normal. And you get to choose in that moment if you're going to stay or if you're going to leave. As Andy Kolber often says, that you don't have to white knuckle your way through life or try harder. What if you chose to try softer in that moment? Congratulations, you got yourself dressed and out the door and you went to try something. And if that's what your system can handle right now, that's okay. You don't have to force yourself to sit through an entire service. If you get your kids to the check-in area and you decide, I don't think I can leave my kids here, that's okay. Our son sat with us every single first Sunday that we walked into a new church. He just sat with us in the main sanctuary through the service. And we brought a book for him to color or read or an activity to do. You get to choose. And if it feels like too much, that's okay. You get to leave. You don't have to stay. Go out for a nice breakfast. You're already dressed up. Go out for a cup of coffee or a donut with your kids. You get to choose those things, and you get to recognize what's happening in your body, what feels safe, what feels invitational, what feels like an opportunity for connection versus what feels like someone's forcing you, or that you are kind of shoulding yourself into doing these things. So I hope that is helpful, Elizabeth. Our next question comes from Kathy in Vermont. She says, "Hi, Brian. Can you point me in a direction to help me reconcile Old Testament God with Jesus in the New Testament? Genocide, rape, murder, abuse, misogyny, sex trafficking, slavery, etc., and the men who commit these evil acts are praised and recognized, celebrated as examples of faithfulness, while the victims are often unnamed and forgotten. I don't know how to wrap my head around it." And thank you. Kathy, oh man, I recognize that this can be a really complicated question. And I want to say that I am not a theologian and I don't want to step outside of my lane. I am an ordained pastor and went to Bible college, but I don't necessarily feel equipped or qualified to address this completely head on. So I just want to confess that to you up front. Anything I say are my processing in real-time thoughts, feelings, and opinions. Don't take them as gospel truth. Also, I want you to recognize that you should have a hard time wrapping your head around it. A lot of it just doesn't make sense. So much of that culture and society was so deeply patriarchal in nature. So it also makes sense that people were treated that way. It certainly doesn't excuse it, but it does help us to understand how or why it was happening as much as it was. Personally, I also don't know how to make sense of it. You've got examples like Abraham and Hagar, Jacob and Rachel, Judah and Tamar, David and Bathsheba, and plenty of other examples. And when victims and survivors are unnamed, forgotten, dismissed, disbelieved, dehumanized, it is abusive behavior. I want to be really clear about that. And when leaders or pastors work extra hard to quiet those stories or center the abusers or perpetrators, I would listen extra carefully and have my antenna up. I will say that in reconciling with the New Testament, Jesus did a lot of work to turn systems upside down. His Sermon on the Mount highlights those who were typically sent to the margins or overlooked. He had women disciples and often found himself speaking with or ministering to those women and often called out for it. Some books and resources that I have found helpful in reading biblical literature and discovering new ways of reading or interpreting it are Knock at the Sky by Liz Charlotte Grant, and she handles, I think, or tackles some of those Old Testament questions. Strange Religion by Nijay Gupta is excellent, kind of giving some more context around why the early church disciples were so, strange and weird. You may also want to check out I've Got Questions by Erin Moon, and she asks a lot of those really hard questions as well. And if you're looking for more about patriarchy and how it has so embedded itself in our Christian culture today, you may also want to check out Becoming the Pastor's Wife by Beth Allison Barr. So I hope that is helpful, Kathy. Our next comment comes from Jesse in New Mexico, who says, "This is not a question, just a comment. I really, really like your podcast. I so appreciate the care and gentleness that you put into it, and you have excellent guests that you interview. I listen almost every day, and I'm moved. I really appreciate you. Thank you for the care that you offer, especially for people when we're hurting." Thank you so much, Jesse. And if you would head to Apple Podcasts or Spotify to leave us a short rating and review, I would be so grateful. It is a lot of work to prepare for these interviews, to read. I always read a book if I know I'm going to speak to the author, cover to cover, acknowledgments, introductions, and everything, because I feel like that's the right thing to do. It shows respect to the person I'm talking with, and it allows me to have a better conversation with them. And I so appreciate that you appreciate the care and gentleness. I think there are enough people out there who approach this work with a burn it all down attitude, which is not what I want to do, or who are here to point out and share all the awful things that are happening. And I get it. And to a degree, we need some of that. But that's not what I'm hoping to do with my work. It is, like I always say, to move us toward healing and wholeness. And so I hope that you feel that. I hope that you receive it. And I hope that it helps in that kind of a way. Our next question is a very short one, and it comes from Val in Richmond, Virginia. And she just says, the extent and impact of sexual abuse in the church, ? And oh man, Val, this has been talked about, written about, and studied for at least the last 50 years, especially starting with the sex abuse scandals and reports within the Catholic Church in the 80s. That story was broken by the Boston Globe, turned into a movie, all of these things. I did do a little bit of research preparing for this question. One of the 3 largest faith-based insurance companies, which insures nearly 160,000 churches, reported over 7,000 claims of clergy sexual abuse from 1987 to 2007. And they say that that's an average of 260 claims a year of clergy sexual abuse. The Houston Chronicle published a series uncovering sexual abuse and its cover-up by the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S., identifying 380 abusers and 700 alleged victims over 20 years. A 2011 study from the National Library of Medicine states that its global prevalence rate is around 18% for girls and 7.6% for boys. Those numbers are way too high. And I found a 2024 article from a law firm that shared one study conducted in Germany that found that 4.4% of its overall clergy had been accused of the sexual abuse of minors. The victims were predominantly male and children under the age of 14. And in 80% of cases, the sexual abuse involved bodily contact. Another study of French Catholic priests found systemic sexual abuse that had been carried out by almost 3,000 priests and members of the clergy since 1950. The estimated number of victims identified in the French Catholic Church was an astonishing 216,000 people, and about 80% of those victims were boys. In the U.S., more than 5,300 priests and other members of the clergy have been accused of sexually abusing children. According to a ProPublica data compilation, a total of 757 credibly accused perpetrators of clergy sexual assault had been named in California as of 2020. And the Archdiocese of LA alone produced files that named 244 priests and other members of the clergy who had been credibly accused of abuse by 656 individuals. Now, I don't know how to add all those numbers up or make total sense of the data, except to say, when you ask the question, the extent and impact of sexual abuse in the church, all I can say is yes. There is entirely too much of it. And this doesn't likely include the likely hundreds, maybe thousands of people who never reported their own sexual abuse. It is tragic. It is evil. It is deeply diabolical that it happens. And if this is part of your story, I am so, so sorry. It should never have happened. And it was wrong, and it was not your fault. This is a huge issue. And the only way it gets addressed is by addressing it and not hiding it. We just talked to Melissa J. Hogan last week, who is an attorney, and she mentioned that most survivors of sexual abuse, especially clergy sexual abuse, do not even disclose until the average age of 50. That's how long it takes survivors to feel safe enough or brave enough to finally share the story of what happened to them. And there is a consensus of people who have worked with those who have experienced sexual violence is that only about 30% 30% of all sexual assaults are reported, with some numbers coming back as low as a 5% reporting rate. There's a Pew Research study from 2019 stating that 3% of women who attended a congregation of any kind in the previous month reported unwanted advances from a religious leader. 3%, 3 out of every 100 women, and the average church is usually about 65 to 100 people, reported in the last month unwanted advances from a religious leader. And 92% of these advances were made secretly, which demonstrates the offender's understanding of the violation. And in addition, over half of those offenders were known to be married. Listen, sexual abuse doesn't have to start with sexual abuse. If there is an unwanted advance, language, touch, or even a look that feels uncomfortable or inappropriate, it is wrong. And if you feel safe enough to do so, go report it to someone, or at least tell it to someone. Hey, this thing happened today at church, or this thing happened in a meeting or a class or a study or whatever it was. The only way we get to start addressing it is by talking about it. Tell it to someone and see how they handle it. And that's one step toward finding a way to feel safe. And if you don't feel safe in that environment, I would invite you to consider leaving. And if you don't feel like you can leave, then that's another sign of organizational or systemic toxicity. The impact of all of this, I don't know if I can quantify, to be honest, because what I can tell you is that lives have been destroyed. And that is not hyperbole. That is not an exaggeration. Leaving the church or the faith seems like the least of these issues, although most pastors and churches would disagree. They think it's the biggest, worst thing that happens. The damage that is done to the bodies and minds of emotions is just indescribable. And the trauma that is carried in our bodies and in the bodies of those who have experienced this. And when it is done in a spiritual setting by a spiritual leader, again, is diabolical and evil. So when we talk about the extent and impact of sexual abuse in the church, what I'm saying is that the extent is enormous. And the impact is literally life-changing for these people. And so we often say, and I think Melissa said it again last week, like sunlight is the best disinfectant. We need to start shining lights in these dark places and looking for ways to pursue justice and accountability and all of these things. One resource that I found really helpful is the book Truth and Repair by Dr. Judith Herman. She does such a great job of explaining what victims and survivors are usually actually looking for and how it is often an entire community that needs to be involved, not just one person. And so how do we move toward that? How do we move toward truth and repair and justice and all of these things? Another book you might want to look at is Pivot by Scott McKnight and Laura Barringer. It's kind of a blueprint for how do we create more healthy cultures in our churches that move toward transparency and accountability. So I hope that is helpful for you. And our last question is from Victoria in Tennessee. Victoria asks, how can reconciliation happen if they feel like they have done no wrong? And by they, Victoria, I assume you mean the perpetrator. And the short answer is it can't, because reconciliation is an act of reconnection and restoration. Something has been broken between two people, and in order to fix it, you need both people to want to be involved. So if they don't feel like they've done anything wrong, then they're not going to recognize that there is some kind of brokenness. They're not going to recognize that rupture, and so they're not going to see the need to repair anything. Forgiveness and repentance are two separate acts. And I want to say upfront that no one should ever be forced to forgive. Many abusive environments will require forgiveness and often require victims to face their abusers or perpetrators and to offer that forgiveness. And so again, I want to remind you that Matthew 18, which is so often weaponized in environments like this, was written for a peer-to-peer relationship. Scott McKnight translates that as if it's between siblings. And when you introduce a power dynamic or differential, Matthew 18 does not apply. And so here I would refer you to go back and listen to episode 7 of the podcast with Scott McKnight, where we talk about Matthew 18 being misinterpreted and weaponized. Forgiveness can be conditional, as in Luke 17. It's based on someone's repentance. It says, if they repent, then you forgive them. If there is no repentance, which would include a confession, ownership, and understanding of what they did to you or how it impacted you, then forgiveness is not required. All that being said, you can 100% choose to forgive someone without them repenting. And it should be your choice to do so. Again, you need to reclaim your own agency. You get to choose if you want to forgive someone, even if they haven't repented. And in fact, it's often the case when we can't reconcile with someone. Perhaps it's a parent or a loved one or someone who passed away or is otherwise out of contact. Forgiveness is something you get to choose to do. It should not be forced upon you. Reconciliation is also something you can choose to do and requires both parties. It's a restoration, again, of relationship and connection. We often hear about this idea of rupture and repair. It's a normal cycle. It's a normal process that as we go through life in our relationships, we will experience ruptures. Something happens. We have a disagreement. We have a conflict. We have, whatever it is, this person offends us or hurts us, whether it's a small or big thing. And usually we move to repair it pretty quickly. Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. That's not an apology. I'm so sorry I hurt you. That's an apology. Watch out for things like gaslighting. And you can read the signs with the acronym DARVO. They will deny that they did it. I know that never happened. Attack you. Oh, well, I'm mad at you because you're saying that I did this thing. And then they reverse the victim and offender. Well, I'm actually the one who should be hurt because you're saying I did these things. That's kind of classic gaslighting. And so Wade Mullen writes a lot about false apologies. And Chuck DeGroat, I think, does as well, or what I call faux apologies, FAUX apologies. And so if you read Wade Mullen's book, Something's Not Right, he has a great section on what a false apology and a true apology looks like. And if there is going to be reconciliation, there needs to be a true apology. If there's a rupture in that relationship, we want to work to move toward repair. In her book, Pray Tell, Tiffany Bloom writes that reconciliation should be reserved for repentant individuals, not perpetrators who have no interest in turning from their ways. Honesty and truth must precede reconciliation. And again, I'll link to our episode with Scott McKnight so you can hear how Matthew 18 so often gets, again, misinterpreted, weaponized, and abused in church and faith environments. Forgiveness is entirely up to you. Reconciliation requires both parties to want to move toward that. If you're being forced into either of those things, it is not healthy and it is not right. If they feel that they have done no wrong, then reconciliation, unfortunately, is not really possible. And so you get to choose if and how you want to set up boundaries for yourself to remove yourself from a potentially harmful relationship or situation. And boundaries have nothing to do with you controlling anyone else. It is getting to control what access they have to you. So boundaries are not controlling someone else. It's not, you don't get to tell someone else what they get to do, but you get to say what they are not allowed to do to you. So Victoria, I hope that is helpful for you and hopefully for a few other people. And that's it. That's it for me today. And believe it or not, that's a wrap on season 2 of the podcast. I will include all of the links of all the things that we referenced in the show notes. As I mentioned earlier, during the month of June, we'll be sharing some favorite episode replays right here in your podcast feed. Those episodes will release every Tuesday as usual, like new. And if you're new here, maybe they will be new for you. And then each Friday, you'll get a session recording from a previous annual summit that you can usually only get with an all-access pass. And you'll get an exclusive discount to purchase an all-access pass if you would like to hear more from that summit. You can subscribe or follow the show to get all of those episodes automatically. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review or share with your friends. It's so helpful for us. And as a 501c3 nonprofit, our work is made possible by our generous donors. If this has been helpful to you, consider joining us today at brokentobeloved.org/support. Thanks so much for being here. and for taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope it's been helpful, and here's to moving toward healing and wholeness together. I'll see you next time.